Howdy, howdy. I am Kyle Boone. Welcome back to the Ion College Basketball Podcast YouTube channel. With me today, once again, Jerry Palm, Mr. Bracketology himself, back to talk about his latest bracket after an absolutely wild weekend. A lot of changes in the AP poll on Monday, the coaches poll on Monday, and also, of course, some changes in Mr. Palm's bracket. Purdue, I think Jerry may have put the jinx on Purdue. He wore some Purdue gear last week in his show. And lo and behold, Purdue takes a loss over the weekend to number 21, Indiana. Implications for you, Mr. Palm, on the loss to Indiana. Was that enough to move them off the one line? Or are they strong enough right now that they're still hanging tight with the number one seed?
In fact, they are still the overall number one seed. And we knew that going into the weekend, that Purdue now had a one-loss at least gap between them and current number 2 Alabama to stay the overall number one seed. And there certainly wasn't anything that happened on Saturday to change my mind on that or anybody's mind on that. Purdue still has the best resume in college basketball. It's still not especially close, although now Purdue's in a position where, depending on who they lose to, they could drop down the line, but probably not off with one more loss. But that's the kind of season that they've had. They've built a cushion on the top line of the bracket. And, of course, part of their cushion is the fact that you've got all these Big 12 teams chasing each other and beating each other up and keeping their distance from Purdue as they go through the Big 10 as long as they continue to win. So, yeah, Purdue's still in pretty good shape for the top line of the bracket for at least a little while.
Okay. So on the other side here, we have Indiana toppling Purdue, number one Purdue. That's their first win over an AP-ranked number one team in a decade. So huge win for the Hoosiers. They've now won 6 of their last 7, and they're moving up in your bracket, right? They're up to, I believe it's a 5 seed in your bracket. Is that where you have them?
Yeah, there are 5 today. Indiana's got kind of an interesting resume. They did a fair amount of damage to themselves prior to this hot streak that they're on now. And so they've got 7 losses, and they're not really bad losses. I think only one of them is outside of quad 1, but they're 6-7 total against quad 1 and 2. And not all of those 6 wins are against teams that are in the bracket. So, I mean, that's not really a very good record against the better part of the college basketball. It's not the top half because quad 4 is huge. But, those are the NCAA tournament teams, are almost all, the at-large teams anyway, are going to be quad 1 or quad 2 teams. They don't really have a record that's very good against that group. And, in fact, over the last 30 years, there have only been 2 teams to get a top 4 seed that was below 500 against teams in the top 2 quadrants. So, Indiana's not quite there yet, still work to do, but they're in good form. And if they continue to maintain that form over the rest of this season, Indiana's got some upward mobility still in this bracket.
Okay, that's good to know. So some ugly losses. They didn't start off great this season, but definitely trending in the right direction. The win over number one Purdue has them up to a number 5 seed in your latest bracket. Let's jump to more number 1 seed talk. We talked about Purdue. Kansas got a win over Kentucky. They got a win over Kansas State. That helped them supplant Kansas State as a number 1 seed in your bracket going into the weekend. Kansas, of course, loses to Iowa State over the weekend and does so by 15 points. The game wasn't necessarily close. Do you still have the Jayhawks as a number 1 seed right now, or did that loss do enough to push them down to the number 2 seed line?
No, there's still a 1, but that margin for error is gone now. I mean, they've got 5 losses. And the thing about Kansas is their strength of schedule is so much better than pretty much everyone else's because they also not just play in the best league, but they play a great non-conference schedule as well. So they still have 9 quad 1 wins. Most of those teams are in the bracket. All of the teams that have beaten them are in the bracket. So they're hanging on for now, and their chaser is Arizona. And their resumes are just completely different because of the quality of the teams that each of them get to play. So Kansas is there for now. I think 6 losses. Should they lose to Texas tonight, probably going to knock them off the top line of the bracket. But they're hanging on for the moment.
Okay. So I think that kind of speaks to the bigger picture of the strength of the Big 12, right? Because Arizona, I think, has been arguably the better team, maybe the last couple weeks, maybe the last month, but their opportunities to improve their resume aren't necessarily there. The strength in the Pac-12 lies at the top, and then the middle and the bottom are, okay to maybe not very good. Meanwhile, the Big 12, absolutely loaded. There's 6 teams in the top 20 on Monday's AP Top 25 poll from the Big 12. The very top of the Big 12 obviously has several number 1 seed contenders with Kansas, with Texas. Kansas State has been up there. How are you viewing the Big 12, and how is the Big 12 shaping up in your NCAA tournament picture? Because the top of this league is really good, but the middle and the bottom is actually pretty impressive too, if you kind of exclude maybe OU and not West Virginia, Texas Tech.
Yeah, the Big 12 is very strong at the top, but it's top to bottom strong. Texas Tech is the only team outside the top 50 of the net. Kansas, talking about their schedule, is playing quad 1 teams almost every time they take the floor the rest of the regular season. And, so Arizona, who's playing pretty well, isn't playing Kansas's schedule and playing pretty well. They're just playing pretty well. So they're, nobody's going through the meat grinder that the Big 12 teams are going through. And that's going to affect you at times. And Kansas is in a bit of a funk at the moment. But, there's opportunities to right the ship and get very impressive wins. Like I said, almost every time you take the floor. But even outside that top 6, which has been right around the top 16 of my bracket, I think 5 of them are in the top 16 on Monday. You still have, the other 4 teams. The Texas Tech really is kind of on the outside looking in for the tournament, but both Oklahoma schools and West Virginia, I would consider bubble teams. They still have something of a shot. The problem is, someone's got to finish last, 9th, 8th, and probably not going to have a good enough record to get in. But right now, there's still a month to go before we have to worry about that. So those teams still have a shot, and the Big 12 is just loaded.
Yeah, it's crazy. Texas Tech and OU seem to be trending in the wrong direction. West Virginia and Oklahoma State are trending upwards, but we'll see kind of what that means for their NCAA tournament projections. But definitely the top of the Big 12 and even the middle of the Big 12 is still very strong. Let's go to another league that is not having a good year. Let's just put it kindly. The anti-Big 12, the ACC. The top of the ACC is fairly soft comparative to, I think, historically what we've come to expect from the ACC. And the middle and bottom has just completely fallen out. Virginia, Clemson, UNC all lost this weekend. Duke, Virginia Tech, Miami get win. What is your outlook for the ACC in your latest bracket? I see you've got Virginia as the highest seeded team. They're a number 3 seed in your bracket.
Yeah, if you remember last year was the worst regular season anyone can remember for the ACC. They only put 5 teams in the tournament. Duke was a 2. Carolina was an 8. They both made the Final 4. And then the other 3 teams, Virginia Tech had to win their way in. Notre Dame was the last team in. Miami was a 10 seed. So, yeah, it was a really soft year. This year's better than that. Yeah. But it's not much better than that. You've got, 3 teams in the top half of today's bracket, Virginia, Duke, and Miami. And then it's a battle for, bottom half of the bracket teams, Carolina, Clemson, Pittsburgh. There are several teams that can kind of play their way in, but the pile in the ACC again this year is a pile of teams just trying to do well enough to get in. But the difference is you've got a couple more teams than last year that look like they're going to be comfortably in. But yeah, it's another rough year, for the ACC in terms of the higher quality that you expect from the teams in this league.
Very interesting to watch. Carolina is obviously still hanging on in your latest bracket, kind of in an opposite trajectory as last season. This is a team that started slow, but really finished strong to get in as an 8 seed and make it all the way to the NCAA tournament title game. This year, that seems pretty unlikely, but you never know. The bottom of the ACC, definitely something to watch, because obviously the top is is not very good, and the middle and the bottom has not been very good either. But there's a couple of teams that are still hanging on in your latest projections. So I think that will do it, Mr. Palm. Thank you all for tuning in. If you are watching this right now, go to cbssports.com. Go to Jerry Palm's contributor page. Check out his latest bracket. You can see number 1 seed projections, his entire field for the NCAA tournament. We're just a few weeks away from Selection Sunday. This is really happening quick. So I know this is Jerry Palm season for a lot of folks. So really appreciate your time, Mr. Palm. And we'll see you next week, right?
Yep. Talk to you then.
Sounds good.